welcome back to When Push Comes to Shove. On today's episode, we have the gorgeous Emma here, who is a mother and is going to be telling us all about her birth story. So welcome, Emma.
Hi.
And the floor is yours. Take it away. Tell us all about your birth.
Thank you. So I was pregnant with my first just over 4 years ago now. It was a textbook pregnancy, no problems came up. Very excited. I didn't really have any nerves. I don't know whether that was the naivety of first-time mum and not really knowing what was coming my way. But I was, just very excited about having a baby. We planned for a midwifery-led unit. I wasn't quite feeling brave enough to go home birth at that point because it was my first, but I didn't like the medicalised side of hospital. So I thought the midwifery-led unit was kind of middle ground where I did have access to stuff, but hopefully they would let me do things as naturally as possible. I did do hypnobirthing as well, which I think was partly why I understood that difference and what I felt comfortable with. Unfortunately, at I think I was 40+3, I went in with reduced movements. And the midwife essentially tried to scaremonger me, I now know with better knowledge, with phrases about how much stillbirth increases after you hit term, and that I was risking my baby by not going into hospital and getting induced. But because I was still quite down the hypnobirthing route and wanting to be as natural as possible, I compromised at that point with a sweep because I'd had nothing up to that stage. So I said, you're welcome to do a sweep, and then I want to go home tonight, because mentally I just didn't feel ready to just go into hospital when I wasn't prepared for that. So she did that. Didn't really work, very painful. But I went home and I said, if by tomorrow morning I still haven't felt any movement, so I gave myself that kind of just under 12-hour period. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I'd literally felt absolutely no movements. So I thought, right, this isn't just a case of I hadn't noticed it yesterday because I was busy. There's definitely nothing happening. I've been keeping an eye on it. I best go in. I don't want to be that idiot that ignores the person in the white coat that has a medical degree. And it turns out she was right about stillbirths. So in I went. I got induced at lunchtime that day with the pessary. Nothing happened. So I sent my husband home. I said, you go and get some rest, because when it does start, I'm going to need you. So go and get some sleep. And honestly, about half an hour after he left the hospital, it all started happening. So that was about 10 p.m. that night. Started feeling like period cramps. And I thought, oh, great, something's going on. I managed to get through the night on my own. But about 7 a.m. I texted him and was like, it's really getting difficult now. Can you come back in? So he came back in, and thank God for doing the hypnobirthing. I spent most of that morning sat cross-legged on the bed with my birthing ball in front of me, just hung over it. And from my husband's point of view, I apparently pretty much slept through about every 3 contractions, woke up and grunted through one, and then passed back out for another couple. And I just had my headphones in with my music and was in my own little zone. At no point did I have any checks from the midwives. I didn't ask them for any drugs. I was just in my own little world. And then I think it got to about lunchtime, it was getting quite painful, and the midwife offered me a bath, and I thought, well, that sounds quite nice. So I went and had a lovely warm bath, and I think I was in there for about an hour because it was a nice old tin bath, so it stayed beautifully warm for a very long time. And that actually stopped everything in its tracks.
Okay.
So that afternoon was almost back to the day before, where I was back to normal, nothing going on. And then my friend, who was going to be my other birthing partner, popped in to visit because that was a Friday night, so she'd finished work. She came up, bought me some dinner, and we were just sitting there chatting. And then the midwife came in and went, right, we're taking you down to the labour ward, we're going to break your waters and put the drip in. I'm like, oh, right, okay, we are, right, okay. Which seemed a bit like out the blue, because again, I hadn't asked for any painkillers, they'd not done any checks. And I was like, oh sure.
There wasn't a choice, it was more like, you're going down for this?
Yeah, you're going down. Again, as a first-time mum, I'm like, I'm in your hands now, so sure, okay. So down we went, and they broke my waters about 9:30, and they put the drip in, and they said, you can walk around for about half an hour, but then you're going to have to come and be on the bed. And I thought, well, I'd rather be up and about if you're going to tell me I'm going to be on the bed. So me and my friend went for a walk. It was like a little circle around the ward. I don't even think I made it halfway round before the contractions really hit me fast. And my friend's in a wheelchair, so I was basically hanging off the back of her wheelchair for support while we went round. We got back to the room at the same time as my husband, because he had disappeared off to collect my placenta kit once we realised this was all going on. I was like, we're going to need that in the morning. So he got back and met us back at the room. And then that was it. I was on the bed, had the monitor round my stomach. That was about 10 p.m. I got on the bed. I then had not the nicest midwife who was with me for the actual labour. Didn't look at my notes or my birth plan or anything, wasn't interested. I think there was even, if I remember rightly, a bit of a smirk look about the whole hypnobirthing thing.
Was you still using the hypnobirthing at this time?
Yeah, had my headphones in the whole time. Got me through it. Honestly, I think I'd have a much more traumatic memory if I didn't have that to get me through. I guess people need to know that I am awful with pain. I always joked through pregnancy that I would be the mad woman running up and down the hospital wards, nicking everyone else's drugs to get me through. So the fact that I got through this birth with a couple of puffs on gas and air amazes me. So yeah, she strapped me to the bed. And I remember at one point during the contractions, when they were really strong, in my head, all I wanted to do was flip myself over onto my hands and knees and just have my arms up on the back of the bed and just be leant over the back of the bed. But I was not allowed to move, because apparently we might lose the baby's heartbeat whilst I turned on the monitor. So from, about 10 p.m. until baby came at 3:30 the next morning, I was stuck laying on my back, partly propped up, which did not help with my back pain.
No, it really doesn't. And the hands and knees position is such a great position.
Exactly, which I think is why it was my instinct to just, that's all I could think about. I was like, I just want to roll over. I was like, even if we lose the baby, surely you can just jiggle the monitor and find baby again. Like, it would take 2 seconds for me to roll over. But the most she'd let me do is slightly shift my hips to one side, which actually wasn't any more comfortable. So I was like, nope, I'll just go back on my back, it's fine. So yeah, I was headphones in. I don't really remember anything that was going on around me. I couldn't really hear much of what my husband or my birthing partner was saying, because I just had my headphones in. I was just trying to deal with each contraction as it came. And because it was Pitocin, they were so quick and fast. There was barely any gap between them. They were so strong, it was ridiculous. I remember at one point I did kind of voice my things. I remember saying, I can't do this anymore, it's too much, I can't do it. At which point the lovely midwife popped up with, do you want an epidural? Even though I'd specifically said everywhere, I'll go up the scale, I'll start paracetamol. If that doesn't work, I'll go gas and air. If not that, we'll look at like pethidine, dimorphine. But I absolutely want to avoid getting all the way up to an epidural unless it's like worse than I could ever possibly imagine childbirth would ever be.
Have they offered you any checks before offering?
No, nothing else. I'd not had any paracetamol. Oh, I'd had a couple of puffs on the gas and air, but I've never done drugs, so that was my first experience. I hated it. I really, after a couple of puffs, my husband said I looked like a chameleon. My eyes were going everywhere, and I hated the feel of being out of control. So I just kept shoving it back at him. And I think in the end, what I did with it was, when I was like, oh, it's too painful, give me the gas and air, I wasn't actually breathing it, I was just biting on the mouthpiece for something to let a bit of the pain out. But I wasn't using it. So yeah, she's like, do you want an epidural? And I'm like, no. Then the next contraction hits, so I couldn't really say any more or fight my corner. And then again, I think I must have been like, oh my God, it really hurts, this is so difficult. And at this point now, I know I was probably in transition at that stage.
That's what it sounds like. That's why I'm wondering why she would have offered you an epidural.
Well, yeah, now I look back, I'm like, surely that would have been too late. They wouldn't give me one anyway.
Yeah, she should more have been giving you support and saying, you do this, you know, you do this.
And I think she must have offered it 3 or 4 times. And I think eventually, as much as I was really struggling, I knew what I wanted to do in my head, but because I kept getting hit by a contraction, I just couldn't fight my corner. I think in the end, I did shout at her, no, I don't want a fucking epidural. And that was it. She didn't ask again. But yeah, it was a bit crazy, a bit blurred, and just very fast and furious. It felt like there was it felt like there was no gaps to really gather yourself before the next one hit you. So it was really hard to kind of keep getting through it. And then I suddenly got that overwhelming urge of needing to push, just hit me. And I said that out loud. I said, I really feel the urge to push. So that's when she came and examined me. And when they examined me, when they first brought me down to the labour ward to break my waters, I was already at 5 centimetres. So luckily, all that falling asleep over the birthing ball had done something. And then when she checked me at that point, after the Pitocin, I was at 9.5 centimetres. So she said to me, you're not quite there. You can either wait, I'd rather you waited, I think she said an hour, but potentially if we give it 15 minutes, that last little bit will open up, and you can push. And that feeling was so strong that I just said, I don't think I can do it now. Like, if that comes back, I was like, I'm not in control. So I don't think I can just hold off for an hour from doing what my body's telling me. So I think we managed the 15 minutes, but this is where it all went against everything I'd read through hypnobirthing, everything I knew about natural birthing, the best positions to be in to help baby get out naturally without too many problems for the mum. You know, I'm stuck on my back anyway. She then came finally from a little desk at the end of the bed where she'd sat the entire time and done nothing. She came round the bed. She got hold of one knee and pulled it up to my chest. She got my husband on the other side to get my other knee and put it up to my chest. She told me chin to chest and then just made me push. And I did that for God knows how long. I think it was about half an hour, something like that. Real forced, coached pushing. Finally out popped baby. He was perfectly fine. I think there was a bit of meconium that came out with him. I think he kind of pooed on his way out, but nothing to worry about. Placenta was all good. That came out pretty much immediately. Bleeding from me that they cleared up. And I think it was a student midwife that kind of cleared everything up, because then when the doctor came in to stitch me up, she cleared up some more blood. I ended up with, I think it was 13 internal stitches as a continuous stitch, because it was a real ragged tear, so they couldn't do separate, but it had to kind of be a continuous thing. And I've now ended up with a bladder prolapse and a uterus prolapse, thanks to that coached pushing. Yeah. But what we found out was about 5 or 6 hours after birth, I said I needed a wee, and she brought me the bedpan, and I tried to squat over the bedpan, and there's something about that position that I was like, I can't relax and let go. I need to sit on a toilet in the normal way that you wee, and then I'll be able to do it. So she let me walk down to the toilet, and it was a little tiny, piddly little cubicle. And then the next thing I knew, I woke up to about 6 midwives crammed in there with me, and all the alarms going off everywhere. Liters of blood between the first midwife clearing up and the doctor clearing up. Somehow, I don't know, they measure, I guess, what the gauzes and stuff they used to clear it up. Somehow those two numbers maybe hadn't been put together, and no one realised quite how much had been lost. But yeah, my iron was incredibly low, so I ended up having 3 units transfused the following day after birth, once they'd worked that out, because they tried with just 5 units of saline first of all, just to try and get me hydrated and stuff. But yeah, I was still really low. So then the following day it was 3 units of blood, and then I had to stay in another night to make sure that me and baby were both okay. So it definitely didn't go as I wanted with the water birth and the mother-led unit, nice and natural. But I honestly do believe without the hypnobirthing, I think I'd have much more mental health going on around it. I'm quite, as much as I know it was traumatic, because when I tell people, they're like, oh my God, that sounds like loads went on. It sounds awful. I'm not, I don't feel awful about it. So I think it was the hypnobirthing that kept it still quite positive for what it was. Yeah. But it did mean by the time I was pregnant with my second, 2 years after that, I was very adamant about what I wanted with my birth, based on that experience. And like, I learned stupid things, like when she said, I think she told me when I went in and I said, I'll accept a sweep and I'll go home tonight for the reduced movements. I think she said something like, it's like you're 50% more likely to have a stillbirth if you go past kind of term 41 weeks. And I've now learned that 50% is something like a 0.1 chance to a 0.2%. Yeah. I'm like, well, if you told me that statistic, I wouldn't have freaked out so much.
Yeah, it's incredibly low. A lot of the times when I've been with clients and we've been giving a, you know, well, there's a very high statistic that you could have a stillborn or your placenta will stop working. When you actually ask, well, what is the percentage? I haven't ever been told what the percentage was. No midwife has ever been able to say, well, it's da 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 da. Yeah. Yeah, usually it's around a 0.01 to 0.02, but even a 10% chance is a hell of a lot lower than a 50% chance.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the way they choose to word it which frustrates me, because they do scaremonger you into stuff because it sounds terrifying. And like I said, in my head, when I said I come back the next morning, I thought, I just don't want to be the silly woman that ignored medical advice, and to have got all the way to 40+ weeks, I then don't get a baby.
It's like it's almost like planting a little bit of fear there.
Yeah,
and it's very hard to let go of it, isn't it? Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, because like I say, I'd done lots of reading around it, and I knew what I wanted and why I wanted it, but it still got to me.
Yeah.
but I felt a bit more confident with my second because I'd done it once and I'd done even more reading with the second pregnancy, so I felt even more informed with my second one. And I felt like, even with saying to the NHS I want a home birth this time, and obviously you get the home birth team rather than the midwives in the labour ward, I still felt like there was a very high chance of me being coerced towards a hospital birth. And I thought, when you're pregnant and you're trying to be positive, you don't need that negativity. You don't need to be having those fights with other people and in your head about whether you're doing the right thing or not. So I just went down the path of hiring independent midwives, because I thought they will support me 100%. They will only send me to hospital if it absolutely is needed. And I'm not stupid enough not to go to hospital just out of pure pettiness for what can sometimes happen. Like, if it's life or death, or me or baby will be affected, I will obviously go in.
Yes.
But I don't want to go in just for the sake of them ticking boxes and feeling like they're in control of everything, and then kicking you out the other end because they need the bed for the next person. So again, that birth was that pregnancy was pretty textbook. Apart from I had gestational diabetes with my second, but I managed to keep that diet controlled. So as much as I had the independent midwives, I did keep up with my NHS input for the GD. But that meant when I got towards the 38-40 week mark, I had the joys of head of midwifery and then a consultant fight on my hands to tell them why I would not be coming in for being induced. But luckily my independent midwives were awesome. One of them came with me to, I think it was the consultant appointment, which obviously was one of his registrars. But it was great having her there, because I just knew I had someone with a bit more knowledge than me, who could fight my corner if I hit a point where I didn't feel I was confident enough or doing a good enough job. And it was brilliant, because he cracked out some statistics. She's like, now why are you saying that when in the WHO guideline or this or whatever it says this? And he's like, well. And I was like, yes, this is why I brought you, this is what I needed. So yeah, they were awesome, and it went exactly as planned. I went same as my first. I went over, I think I ended up having him at 40 plus 5, 40 plus 6, and it was an amazing home water birth. No interventions, no drugs, no checks from the midwives. Every kind of 15 minutes, half an hour, they did a little heartbeat check on baby, but otherwise left me in peace. He came out fine, no problems again with the placenta coming out, no problems with me after, no tears, nothing. Like the dream.
Wow, so quite a different scenario there.
And it did exactly what I wanted it to do. As much as I don't have a bad view of my first birth because of the hypnobirthing, which I did use again with my second, it definitely healed me from the first experience to have that experience that I wanted all along.
Yeah.
And now I'm due my third in about 3 months. I'm hoping
congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, it's quite a journey, and who knows what this one might throw up. Because you never do know, but fingers crossed. Yeah.
But as you said, birth is seen as a medical event, and it's actually not. There is medicine there, and it's great. Intervention in medicine is amazing when there's a problem.
Yes.
But 9 times out of 10, there are not problems. There are perceived problems by people, by midwives sometimes. They have very strict guidelines on what is and what isn't classed as dangerous. But in 9 times out of 10 cases, birth is not a medical event. It's a beautiful, whole encompassing event that is life-changing and beautiful. And I'm so glad that you were able to get that your second time.
Yeah, me too. And it's so sad, because I'm so aware that because we've gone so medicalised with birth, so many midwives clearly aren't comfortable or confident to deal with most of, like you say, problems that come up, that actually there are stuff you can do outside of hospital to fix those problems and get baby out naturally. But a lot of midwives almost become unexperienced, unqualified in that sense, because they're in hospital with all the bits and bobs to do it for them, rather than using manual techniques or changing position, all that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Wow. Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much for telling us your story.
Oh, you're welcome. Anything to help other people kind of learn how it can be, what can go on.
Yeah, and obviously,
and like I say, if someone had told me when it was my first birth a bit more, I'd have felt more confident to fight my corner. So it is just about kind of passing on the knowledge and educating others so that they can feel confident